And when I read it, it was like, wow, that's me. So it really if you play with the tools, you get more out of it.
It seems like those small wins are a really great place to start, to show those doubters, those people that are fearing being obsolete, that there's opportunity.
Wait a second, that's not really the conversation I want to have. This is the conversation I really want to have. And I'll tweak it this, I'll tweak that. And that's where the human element comes in.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Tami, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's very different this time. We were on Zoom, now here we are in person. I think what's also different is obviously your role. Since we spoke, when we first spoke, you were Chief People Officer at Pagaya, and now you're the Chief Development Officer. So for folks who are catching up on that last episode, can you explain kind of what that shift, just let's talk through the transition and what your focus is now compared to what it used to be?
Yeah, it is a big shift. So about a little over a year ago, I shifted out of the direct day-to-day people space and took on more of a broader strategic role, helping the company to bring people and organizations to support our mission by helping with our board, building an advisory board, working with all different types of relationships across asset managers and investors and whatnot. It's a very more broad and strategic role and very different. While it's called a development role and sometimes can be sound confusing,
Yeah.
Almost thinking it's like people development.
Right.
It's more about corporate development and
Relationships.
business development
Yeah.
and relationships. Akin to like a vice chair at a
Yeah.
company.
Okay.
And obviously, at the same time, I was also named to the board of Pagaya. So I play a very dual role as a insider on the board at the same time as being someone who's out there, helping to forward the mission through people and organizations.
Yeah. Connecting.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great frame for today's conversation, because you are seeing it from that bird's eye view. And what it is and what we're going to be talking about is the impact of the AI revolution and how companies are approaching that with a view to talent. So we're going to get to lean on that lens that you've had coming through as a Chief People Officer. But so since we last spoke, actually since the World Economic Forum Summit, and a lot has changed already, right?
Yeah.
So the big news in AI obviously was the DeepSeek R1 model that came out of China.
Yep.
It brought costs down and suddenly kind of changed the game for people, democratized access to AI. Chinese companies across the board were adopting it and integrating it into their business. Huge companies like Aramco in Saudi Arabia are doing the same thing. So there's this sudden increase in momentum of companies integrating AI, which is having huge impacts, right? And just sort of figuring out how we're going to do this and all of that. So given all that changing landscape and that big shift just in the last month, what are for you the biggest, have you had time to take stock, I guess?
Well, I think we don't have a choice but to take stock, because the speed at which things are happening is quicker than we'd imagine, when in the past it might have been a year before you had the next update to one of these generative AI tools. Now it's like 3 months.
Right.
So you don't really have the time to take stock. But what I think it really evokes is the idea that you have to be adaptable and always learning and always evolving. And that's what sort of differentiates us from the technology itself.
And we got to try and unpack that, because that can be very much a buzzword, right? Everyone's saying you need to be adaptable. And so today we want to really kind of unpack that. But I think let's start with the Chief People Officer role. So you came out of that role. You've spent a lot of your career in that role. You have a perspective on this that we should maybe be rethinking what that role actually does, rethinking the name for that role. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's not just about the name, but the name does help to give you color on what you're supposed to be doing and where you're focused. And I think in the past it was people and how people are going to help drive your process and your strategy. Now it's people and technology, and it's a real workforce change.
Yeah.
And it really centers around the culture you want to have at your company. And that's why if I were to make a change, it would maybe be chief culture or workforce officer or chief culture officer, something that really talks about where you want to be driving the values for the company, and the values will be integrated in between technology and people, or AI and people.
So I love the fact that culture is coming back. I've talked about calling this role potentially the learning culture officer. And I know learning culture, we've talked about that on the previous episode. Why is culture now becoming so important? Because I think this is an important, you mentioned it's now people plus technology. You cannot uncouple those anymore, right? They're 100% together. So why is culture becoming more important?
Well, I don't know if it's more important. It's always been important. And the companies that really succeed are ones that really have the strong values and norms that go along with that, and really understand how they want to get things done. And that's what culture does. It gives everybody at the company what's expected of them on how to work. And I think in this case, as we get into this AI revolution, it's more about how you're going to integrate it, and what are those values, and how, and the values could stay the same. You could still care about learning, you could still care about collaboration, you could still care about debating, all that kind of stuff is still there as key components to your culture. But maybe the way the norms or those collection of behaviors manifest differently, and guide you. So it serves as sort of like a guide.
And the problem with culture as well is that it's bottoms up, right? It develops bottoms up. So this isn't something you can come in and say, and also people don't even know, right? Everything is changing so quickly that no one knows what kind of culture. So we're talking about this sort of organic, shaped. You need to direct where that culture is going, which is very challenging, right? So let's unpack first some more of those challenges of this integration to really I think understand that problem. What are some of the other, you've talked about data concerns as well. What other challenges are there that make this so difficult for companies?
Well, I think it's it's so big for people to think about, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like people are either talking about it from a cost-cutting perspective, or a cost of computing, or a data perspective, and frankly, it's sort of a force multiplier, and it's something that because of that, it's so big and kind of amorphous. You have to try to figure out how do you break it down into its parts so that people can then start figuring out how they design around it. I think it feels like a little bit boiling the ocean, and some of it feels a little far-fetched to people, and so. And we all know with every major kind of innovation that's happened, there's always fear. And that fear guides you to want to stay with what you know versus go to what's new and what's changed. And so I think with all of that, you find yourself in a place where people don't know where to start. And the easy thing that people say is, well, you take out a help desk, or you replace it with AI. And it really goes to, well, we could get efficiencies with people. And I really want to veer people away from that as the only win for AI. I think the win is that force multiplier of really taking people and technology together to be even much more powerful. And there's so much in the day-to-day that we do that frustrates us in our jobs. And a lot of it's that lower level, Q&A stuff that you have to find out, or where you have to seek things, or admin stuff, right? And if that stuff can be taken over by some of these tools, think about the power of then you can evaluate. You can concentrate on ideas that can take you to the next step, gives you space to innovate.
The higher level thinking.
Which we all want to do.
Exactly.
But we don't get to.
So where do you start with that? I mean, let's talk practically at Pagaya. I mean, a lot of companies we speak to, they set up enablement teams, they have recurring enablement, AI enablement meetings, and what's actually happening at these meetings? What are these task forces focusing on? How do you approach this?
Well, I don't know if this is specific to Pagaya, but with companies and people I speak to, I think it's really a rethink of your organization, how it's designed, what you're trying to do in achieving your mission, and what you need to get done, and where you have efficiencies and where you don't. And I think a first look is just to see where are your resources, Where do you need to have your resources? Because a lot of times your resources may not be in the places where you have the most critical needs. And where are your gaps? And then see with those gaps where you might be able to fill that with potentially AI support, or where you actually just need to shift your organizational structure or your thinking. So it's a hard one. I wish I had a good answer. I think a lot of us need to kind of get together and think about, where do you start? And I think always the easy part for people is, well, where do I need to get cost savings? And I think that would be kind of the lowest common. Well, I think it's the lowest common denominator. I think you have to kind of do a picture of, here's my organization today, here's all the resources and where I'm spending my money and people dollars, and what do I need to achieve, going forward, and does that structure fit with what I need, and where I can leverage tools to actually enable me.
It also feels like a good way to help those that are consumed by the fear of becoming obsolete to see the potential of it. The printing press is a great example of it. There were so many of these scribes that talked about, when the printing press came out, how it was multiplying junk information, and suddenly people were, what was painstaking to write out and really think through, people were just printing off garbage. But obviously then people eventually saw through the printing press the impact of being able to scale your thinking and your writing, and obviously we know how that turned out, right? So it seems like those small wins are a really great place to start, to show those doubters, those people that are fearing being obsolete, that there is opportunity in here, right? And to start small and to, So has there been anything you've seen work in that? Like anything that you can share that you've tried and like it's actually been promising?
I wish I could say there are, because I think we're still in the nascent phase of it. So I wish there was a good example. But I think the fear is misplaced because people don't become obsolete. They just shift, change, and evolve to different things. And in every major revolution, as you could say, technology or whatnot, you always have fear of what you know versus what you don't know. And people, like, what is the adage from Ford when the car came out? It was like people wanted faster horses because that was what they knew, but they didn't want a car. And now
there were huge safety concerns around the car at first, right?
But that's the thing. What most happens in this change conversation is we start citing the reason why it won't work. And we start figuring out why we should stay where we are, not move forward. And I think we have to reframe that whole thinking and say, why shouldn't we jump headfirst and experiment and be okay that it might fail and it might not work. But that experimentation will lead you to a better outcome and lead you to learning that can get you to the right outcome.
So I totally get that. I think a lot of listeners of this show get that. How do you have that conversation with someone who has their walls up about this?
Gosh, it's a tough one. I mean, I think we deal with that every day in companies where, some people just really want to stay where they are and do what they've done and keep, cranking that,
the widgets out or whatever.
Exactly. And just want to do what they know. And I think, the way we've been designed is you acquire expertise and then you just continue to do that. And I think that's not going to be the way it's going to be in the future. So I think you have to show people small wins and you have to give them experience with it. They have to start experimenting with it in a way that's safe, that they don't feel would be
exposing themselves.
Or making them fear their job. I mean, at the end of the day, most people, when they think of AI, think I'm going to be replaced. And so how do they get to a place where they feel I'm just going to be enhanced? I'm going to be made greater. I'm going to be able to do the higher level things that I've always wanted to do.
It's sort of like a growth mindset, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here, like getting leaders on board with that. So when I think about leadership programs, that's probably a starting point as well. That self-awareness, that growth mindset, that's seeing that opportunity. But if we play that out, what are some of the other skills you would focus on for leaders to be able to adapt and augment themselves with AI?
There's so many, but we've talked about adaptability, learning agility. I mean, obviously I'm always talking about learning agility, and being open to experimentation, being willing to fail. I mean, I think we've been in an environment for a very long time where failure is not an option, and people, and you're taught that, like, you want to get 100 on the test. You don't want to get
Totally.
99, right? And
Yeah.
so I think there's a little bit of reframing that this iteration is good, and failing and getting back on your feet and building resiliency is actually going to pay dividends for you in the future.
Yeah, so this is like tease this apart a bit, because I think this is so important, that idea that there is a right answer, which is what we taught at school, right? C is the right answer in this question. There's no other, right? It's just C. Versus like what reality shows is that it's kind of gray. Like there's often not a very clear right answer, and it's just and I think the empowering part is then it's just testable. Whatever you want to try, basically, you want to do is testable. Like what can you say about that? And like how, going back to culture, like how do you see that sort of becoming part of the culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing to think about is really to frame, what are we going to define expertise to be in the future?
Yeah.
And right now, we all have kind of grown with this trial and error experiences that you have at different companies or in different within the same company, but different roles. And then that informs how you're going to teach the next generation of people underneath you, or how you're going to guide your team. And because AI probably will help get people from the A to B of learning on expertise, you're now starting with, well, we need people that are actually going to start to and analyze it, validate it, put some uniqueness to it, right, on top of it. So that's different. And so we're going to be evaluating expertise very, very differently. And because of that, you're going to be recruiting differently. You're going to be structuring your job roles differently, and your organizational structure. And with all of that, people then have to say, well, what is the type of person I need to work with the technology to achieve the right goal? And maybe you're not going to hire for one job that looks like a job description. You're going to hire for expertise across, and people are going to do tasks, and maybe it'll be much more horizontal than it would be vertical. And org design might look very different.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just being a little out there and thinking, but I
that's
do think it's going to be disruptive.
Yeah, and that's what I want to encourage that. And I think this is important. We've been talking about this now as well. Like there is no right answer. So I think for my next few questions, I'm going to throw out some stuff there, and let's just lean into, you've done some impressive things throughout your career. You've got experience. You've got an opinion that matters. What we're saying is this isn't the right answer. Don't follow Tami's way, right? Like people listening, but like be part of the conversation, right? So So let's start with, you mentioned the ability to analyze, to kind of like identify the so what, the ability, you said, to add uniqueness to something. That's such an interesting one as well, because it's like self-expression, like bringing personality, being authentic. These are buzzwords that have floated around the leadership development circles for a while. And I think you're rightfully saying that they're becoming more and more important. So let's just unpack that a little bit more. Like how would you evaluate talent now with an eye on the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. I think there's, first it's about seeing if people are willing to learn. Because if, like we said before, if somebody's like, this is the way I do it, I'm going to always want to do it this way, that's not going to work, right? Yeah. So you need to see if people are okay to fail and get back on their feet, that they can take lots of data that's given at them through these different systems and be able to evaluate it, and then to synthesize it, and then to validate it. Like, so those are the things I think are going to be important, because we don't know where the data is coming from all the time. And we can't just rely on, if you put it into one of these open AI or Claude or whatever, and it comes out and you're like, okay, well, where's the annotation to it? Where's it coming from? Who's the expert behind it? Or where's the facts, right? So part of what we're going to have to do is be more akin to really evaluating the data that's coming out, and then putting, like I said, your unique spin on it. If every single company uses AI in the same way and takes out resources and puts in AI, then where is the uniqueness in that company? And how are they going to differentiate themselves between their competitors? And the only way to do that is people. Yeah,
that's such a great point, right? Because you see so many of these tools that are coming out with AI integrated in them, and then 4 or 5 of the exact same things pop up. And I mean, I think it's fair to bet that the ones that win will be the ones with the right people in place. So do you believe that and I love the way you kind of broke them down, by the way, the sort of skills that we really need for people. Do you think those are developable? Do you think you can,
Well, I think there's a lot we have to talk about in our education system too, because unfortunately our education system is still stuck in the dark ages.
Starting from the beginning, right?
Yeah, it's still based on, tests and I teach you some facts and you have to spit them back and know them, or then you're writing about them or whatever. And that system I don't think works. I've had the pleasure of working with one of a really interesting school called the Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre program over at USC.
Oh, cool.
And that program is a degree in disruption. And what it's tried to do is take technology, business, and the arts and make it multidisciplinary and break down the lines within the university that you don't always have to do the 101, 201, 301. You might take the 201 because you've tested out of the 101. You might take the 402 or whatever and put those together. And then you're solving a problem that needs all three of those. And it's creating a student that now has critical thinking, system thinking, agility, experimentation, learning, and understands across the board topics and is not just I can program that or I can make that trade happen.
Right. And so that it's a self-directed learning path in a way, right? That you figure out where you're interested in, where you can test out of and all that, which I think is so important. Where I get stuck is like not everyone wants that, right? So like how do we and do we I don't know if that's like a controversial question, but like how do we and do we bring those people along who don't want to find their own path, who want to follow and be told what to do? Like, is there a place for them?
I think there will be. I don't think it's going to be binary.
Okay.
So I don't think it's like you don't do this, you don't get ahead. But if you want to be in leadership roles and you want to be in driving, big teams or big projects, I do think you're going to have to go that direction. If you're comfortable being sort of in one spot or another, I think there'll still be roles there. It's just be different.
I wonder though, right? Like
maybe not. I mean,
if AI eats productivity, right? And so that the following and executing of tasks is like nothing's going to do it better than AI, or no person's going to do it better than AI.
Look, if you have a data set that you already know and I take it like the HR help desk stuff and it's just spitting out benefits or it's spitting out, what's your vacation allowance or whatever it is, those things, are going to be replacing people. And frankly, they've already been replacing people for a very, very long time. We've outsourced these things. We've tried to minimize it.
Well,
We've
people
tried
just
to
do
put
them
it
on
online.
autopilot.
Doing it online, all that stuff. So I don't think that those things will be replaced. And obviously there's still going to be a big trade kind of contingent. I actually think there'll be a resurgence of people going into sort of the trade skills.
I like that. And working with your hands.
And I think that'll be a big change. And you see that I was recently in Houston, and there's a number of these innovation centers around the world that are starting to realize that there's a huge market for people that want to go into trade roles, and they're high paying too, and they have great opportunities for people who want that kind of a role. So I think there'll be roles for different people in different places, but what we see today is not what we'll see tomorrow, and the hard part is to imagine what that will look like. And that's why everyone has fear, right? Because there's an unknown in front of me. I don't know what that means, and what I always say to people, you can only do right now is prepare and get yourself ready if you want to continue to evolve. And the way to do that is to be learning, playing with the technology, and seeing how you can leverage the technology to have a higher outcome for yourself and a higher outcome for your company.
I was going to ask you what you're doing to prepare. That's a great answer. That's the only way to do it, is just get your hands dirty and learn and try things, make things.
And fail and be okay with failing.
Exactly. It's frustrating, and I saw my son this morning doing that, just trying to build a fort and just like getting so frustrated with it. And it's so easy to see it when it's your son or your kid, right? But like, that's the thing you want to guard against, right? That's the thing you want to make sure you don't have in your organization, that people just get and then like, there's no chance of being exposed and learning. Yeah.
But I also think companies need to give people a little slack to have that failure moment,
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
not give them ones and dones. Like
Yeah, it's got to be the environment.
you gotta have a culture, hence why the culture has to be there, of allowing people to experiment. And
Yeah.
experiment means you're gonna fail a lot.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're not good or you're not gonna be successful.
Mm.
And it doesn't have I don't know if it'll have a lot to say about potential, because potential is going to look differently in the future too.
Yeah.
But people have to have that safe environment to do it.
Yeah. Another thing that just sort of tangent a little bit here, that what we've been talking about, the freeing up of time basically to think, and that is it frees up time to make things, like your trade example, but also like, I mean, creating things, like people can now code apps in minutes and, make art. And like, so it almost feels like zooming out for a bit at the human level, we're going to have all this extra time to make things, create things, try things, like you say. How would you encourage something like that? And what would that look like?
Broadly, I think even for Pagaya and other companies is really thinking about, that experimentation I keep talking about, and I don't know if I have a good answer for this one, because
we don't know, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And we need to keep having conversations to even suss out ideas. And again, I don't think everyone should go away from this podcast saying, I have to now go look at my company and find every place to put AI.
Yeah.
Because that would be wrong.
Yeah.
I think what you have to do is go and say, where do I have pain points? And wherever that pain point is, could it actually be helped by using technology in the AI way?
Yeah. The small wins.
Yeah. And then try it out.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of HR teams are doing that today.
Yeah.
In, seeing how, they're using one of the generative AIs to get ideas on helping managers have the right conversations with employees, or helping them to write a better review for somebody, or giving feedback in a more easy way. Like you could imagine if you're constantly on one of these tools and it gets to know you.
Yeah.
And
you'll put
the people you
leading.
need,
Yeah.
it then allows you to say, well,
Yeah.
this is a better way to have that conversation, or this is how I would couch it, or if this person has this kind of a lean, this is how I would do it.
Yeah.
I laugh because I think ChatGPT knows me so well now. I think I asked it recently, like what animal I'd be and why, and it came up.
Octopus?
No, actually not an octopus. It came up with two. It said an eagle and a wolf.
Okay.
Eagle for long-term vision and knowing how to get there, and a wolf because I like to work in packs and collaborate and all that. And then I said, well, what would I be if I was together one? And it said a peregrine falcon. I was wow,
Totally.
and when I read it, it was like, wow, that's me. So it really like it's, if you play with the tools, you get more out of it. So it's kind of like the more you do, the more you get. And then through that to the critical thinking, the system thinking, you say, how can I apply that in the work I do?
Yeah.
How could I help make some of these efficiencies go away that mire me with that, the admin or the logistics or the things that don't allow me to actually be strategic.
Yeah, that's a cool example. And we, funnily enough, have peregrine falcons flying over our house like all the time. That's like the main bird of prey. So I had a thought as well, and I used a Claude project to manage my team. And I basically I feed it in the conversations I have one-on-ones. And it just helps me keep track of their strengths, their areas of improvement, basically the conversation in like a high level, which is so helpful, right? Because like how many times you sit down and you're like, what did we talk about last time, let alone the last 8 times, right? And you got all of that summarized and updated. And then you just get to show up and kind of go back to what you said, like synthesize that for people, communicate it in a way that's like uniquely you and authentic. And yeah, I mean, that's what
it gives you the ability to react versus just write it. So I think a lot of times when we're doing something and we're trying to put stuff, it takes us a while to put it down on paper first. Yeah. And I love that it's like Claude or ChatGPT becomes sort of like your first draft.
Exactly.
and it takes out that writer's block.
Yeah, no blank page.
Yeah, like I love writing. Here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I don't even do it in a very good way. I probably have tons of spelling mistakes, and I'm just typing it as I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, stream of
and
conscious.
I'm like, what do you think? And then I'm like, oh, that's totally wrong. Try again. You know, what else do you think?
Yeah.
You know,
oh, actually, I meant this.
I meant this, right?
Yeah.
So you get smarter at how to leverage it.
Yeah.
And then through that, you could then say, wait a second, that's not really the conversation I want to have. This is the conversation I really want to have. And I'll tweak it this, I'll tweak that. And that's where the human element comes in.
Does the future have more or less people working at companies?
You know, if I'm a betting person, I'm going to say more people. And I know that's not what people would expect me to say.
Yeah, I like that.
And the reason I'm going to say that is because with every major technology advancement that we've had, we've always thought it was going to replace, and it always augmented. So I think more.
I like the optimism in that. I do. And I think,
and there'll be roles we don't even realize are today. And maybe there's not something called a role anymore, because I'm trying to really break down all of my preconceived notions about what it could be, because I'm working from the structure we have today to a structure I don't know. So I would even say maybe people come in and they're like, here are the expertise I'm going to attribute to this company today. And I have 5 of them, and you have 10, and you have 3, and you have 6. And then we collect those together around, you know, instead of a manager, maybe it's a facilitator or a partner or whatever. I don't know.
Well, I'm just pulling on that. That's an interesting concept. And then
just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, and an AI could match that, right? It could match that with the needs in the org and go, oh, actually, this project needs that. So you go work on this. And so every day for an employee could be an exciting new thing, like they get to work on in the way they want to work on it. And you're moving the business forward with that. I mean, like
it would almost be like you had like a skills database of everybody, and they can go in and say, here's my motivation, stuff I love to do. Here's what I'm really good at.
Yeah, examples, evidence.
And here's my evidence of it from other things I've done.
Right.
And there'll be some project or challenge.
Right.
And okay, you're deployed at that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And here's what I want to learn.
Yeah.
Right. Or like recommended. You should, what about learning this? Because there's this need over here, you know. I mean, is that what a skills-based organization is?
I think it will be to some extent, and maybe it's not skills; it's expertise. I want to get it away from just even like the tactical.
Yeah, there's a problem with that word, right? It's too kind of like limiting.
It does feel limiting.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in my past, I've worked in a number of organizations where they only ask you to do a certain job using certain skills you have, right? But people are multifaceted and they have multiple expertise. And when I used to ask people, and especially when I used to teach, I would ask people like, what expertise are you not using on the job that you'd love to? And every hand would go up and they would talk about all these amazing things and you see them light up. And imagine if you could harness that.
Yeah.
It's the motivation and the expertise. You're going to get great output.
Yeah.
And I think technology can enable that.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I think that's exceptionally exciting. And yeah, I mean, how do you feel about the word capabilities?
I don't know. I'm not sure I love that word. I think... I don't know. I think it doesn't have the positive spin I'd like on it. Like I want something a little bit
capable.
more.
Yeah.
I want something a little bit more action oriented. Like what word would I use? It's not capabilities, but it's
expertise.
It's
capacity. More than that.
Impact. What's your impact? What's the impact you can have? Like,
yeah.
It's something about impact. I think is what comes to mind versus capability.
Yeah.
Because it's the outcome you're looking for. And how do you leverage your expertise to get the right impact?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we all want to have some sort of sense of accomplishment and joy in what we've delivered.
Yeah, exactly.
So that we'll come back for more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it gets back to the first principles of it, which is what I love about kind of what AI is doing. It's forcing us to think about these things like, what is a job? What is a skill? What is and language matters, right? Like it's like creating this common language is going to be important. It almost feels like part of what needs to be done at companies is creating that common language. And so let's go back to I think the optimism and the opportunity that you see in this. And I'm curious, like starting to get to the idea of kind of advice for people who whether there is that fear, there is that culture that's holding people back, and not wanting to try something and fail. What have you, and I know you've had some amazing initiatives that you've tried, throughout your career. So we're talking about change management here, and I think you've probably done this dozens of times in your career. So it doesn't have to be about AI, but what are some of the things that you've seen work well to get people speaking the same language, moving in the same direction, and to start to see that mindset shift?
Well, it all starts with clear and constant communication. And I think a lot of times as leaders, when we're trying to do something and there's a problem, we quickly jump to, I'm going to solve it. And then I'll teach them how to solve it.
Right.
And actually, that's the wrong approach, because your team probably is closer to this problem in itself.
Yeah.
And they're going to have better ideas potentially than you. And you have to join forces with your people and collaborate for the outcome and explain, here's the problem, here's what we're trying to get to, who has good ideas. So I think as you're trying to have a movement of influencing stuff, you have to change your approach to how you're engaging your team to get to those answers. And, look, we talked a lot in some past podcasts about the learning, creating a continuous learning cycle.
Yeah.
That was a massive shift for how people thought about performance reviews.
Yeah.
And you have people coming into a company as you're scaling it so fast, a very young company, and people want to do what they know. And I had this at this company, or I did it this way. And you get all these, what I call antibodies to the change. And I love that, because then you know what's on their mind and their fear. And then you have to come to them and explain, here's the purpose. And the purpose here is to create an environment where you and your employee have a good rapport and a trusting relationship for both their development and their productivity for you and the company. And if you have to spend time explaining the benefits and showing them the benefits and giving examples of where it works and where it doesn't work. And it's a change process, like you said. And some people are willing to jump in head first and go for it. And some people are still hugging the tree from the old island, right? And what you find is the people in the middle are the ones that help move those that are stuck on it and slow down the people that are running.
Can you say more about that?
Well, we used to use this analogy in one of my other companies of the change process is almost like there's this new island and you're on this island, and everybody on this island is explaining why this island's so good and we shouldn't have to go to that other island. But then there's some people that just jump in and start swimming, right? And then and they could be smart about doing that, but maybe there's those people in the middle are like, wait, there might be a shark in the water, or there might be something else. And they start citing the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
So they're being cautious, but excited. And then you have the people that are not excited at all, right? And then you have the people that are too excited.
Yeah.
And the people that are too excited can't influence the people that are not excited at all.
It's actually,
they're not speaking the same language. It's going to fall flat. And actually your managers usually are in that swimming fast because they've already gone through this phase in their own mind of hugging the tree and spotting the problems. So because they've had more time to wrestle with it, they can get themselves ready to
just
swim.
because of the fact that they've seen it coming sooner.
Yeah, they've seen it coming sooner. So that they get themselves there. So
That's
I do think
point.
all of us go through these motions of it. And I'll give you an example. When I first got the job to go to Apple, I was living in New York. I actually got my offer while I was trick-or-treating with my kids, funny enough. And my husband was like, you have to take the job. And I'm like, oh, we can't do this. All of a sudden I became the person saying there's the no's. And he was the one who was like, yes, we got to do this. And you go through that phase in your mind of, well, it's better here. I should just stay, or this is a big move for our family and why we shouldn't do it. But you realize that you go through each of those phases as you're wrestling with what you're going to do. And if you can, understand that and be aware of it, it helps you get to change faster. But I think change is not easy for anyone.
No.
Even myself, even going into this new role this year, the change was hard. There was a lot of things I didn't know. I had to rethink. I had to redo. I had to unthink. I had to, really try to operate very differently.
Yeah. What was the biggest adjustment for you?
Well, when you have a big team going to a small team, where you're influencing versus owning,
Yeah.
where
Oh,
you're
yeah.
where you're creating something from nothing and you don't know if it's going to work, and you're bringing people and organizations to kind of have conversations when they don't know about you, you don't know about them, and so there's a lot of
unknowns.
There's a lot of unknowns,
Yeah.
and there was nobody paving the way before,
Yeah.
so it wasn't like there was a road there already. You
Yeah.
had to actually dig it up and create it.
But you see that as exciting.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that a natural? I do too. Like I'm wondering if that's a natural thing or if it's something that what are some of those obstacles that flash up in your mind? Maybe you can talk about with this specific transition that was like telling you, Tami, you can't do this. Like you're not going to be able to do this. Like,
Oh, of course you have that every day.
Yeah.
The first part is like, originally I thought I would be keeping my old role and doing this. And then we were like, no, we're just going to go full head first into it. And that was a little bit scary.
Yeah, you're
because
like cutting the ties, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know if I'm going to be successful at it. I don't know if I can actually do this. I actually didn't even know what success would look like.
Yeah.
And that
I
was
remember you saying this in the last episode.
That was really hard.
Yeah.
And when you don't know what success looks like, you can't, like, I'm usually good at, like, I could see the vision ahead, and why they put me in this Falcon view is I could see the vision, and usually I know how to get there. Because I know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
So it's kind of obvious for me where to get from A to B.
Yeah.
But this case, I didn't know what B looked like.
Right.
I didn't know what success looked like.
Right.
I had ideas. I put out goalposts, but it was trial and error.
This just feels like a perfect analogy for what we're talking about at that like societal level, but like everybody is going through this now, right? Like no one knows what B is going to look like with AI. And maybe as a way to kind of wrap this up for folks, like I love that personal story. I really enjoyed kind of that analogy there. If you reflect on that and some of the other changes you've gone through, what advice do you have for people in the next 5 years?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. I think the first thing I would say to people is, you mentioned this before, which is like, I love change. So change excites me. You have to know that about yourself.
Yeah.
Does change excite you or doesn't excite you first?
Yeah.
Like, so
be honest with yourself.
Yeah, be honest with yourself. Have be introspective.
Yeah.
Because that'll help you. And if change doesn't excite you, then, and you need to do it, you're going to have to figure out a way to get over that it doesn't excite you, because it's here.
Yeah.
So
yes.
have a reality check with yourself that it's here, and you're going to have to like embrace it. I think the advice is to go back to the core things about what you love to do, what motivates you, and really put that down on paper, and then try to find things and work that you're doing that aligns with that. And I usually think the rest follows if you align your motivations and what you love to do with the work you're doing. And then it doesn't feel like work. Yeah. And then you're actually just acting versus trying to play a part.
And it's almost like that the landscape now frees that up. So whatever it is that you're interested in, and as long as you're, I think, also curious about the business you're in, the company you're in, the role you're in, right? Like you've got to sort of understand what the purpose of being there is and what this company is trying to achieve. But there's kind of more opportunity now to shape your role, right? You don't have to follow like a set path, and that's probably going to be more and more the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe akin to like the gig economy, right? Like, you know, where you get to choose when and where and how. Yeah. And what could work for you. So it could be similar to that kind of disruption. Yeah. If you think about it.
Almost more complete. Like this is going to be for everyone now.
Yeah, you might actually just have to say, I love to draw, and I love to talk, and I love to read. Yeah. And how do I put those together into a role? Yeah. I could think of actually a collection. I could think of someone on my team a role I would need on my team, actually, someone like visual illustrator of ideas. Like, that's the potential out there for people. I think what the advice I give people is play around with things, test it out, try it on, feel good about failing. Failing is like a way of succeeding. It's learning, right? It's learning. And really just collaborate with people and get advice and seek different opinions, especially those that are different than yours, and have those devil's advocates around you, pushing you to rethink. I do think companies will look different. I think we're going to structure different. You are going to, maybe your resume is no longer a resume, but it's It's a collection of your expertise and skills in a very different way it's written. Maybe you're working for multiple companies at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe you're doing the same thing, but in 6 different companies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The potential is out there for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think schooling and the things that we've done in the past may not be as relevant
Yeah.
unless those things change too.
Yeah. I think about that too with my young kids. And that is definitely the topic for another conversation.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. That advice you just shared at the end there, that was dense. I think people should definitely rewind that, check that out again. We'll probably include like a little clip just on that. Excellent advice, Tami. Been a pleasure talking to you as always. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for always having me.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.